Israel keeps ratcheting up the tension in Gaza. They have officially launched a new ground offensive into Gaza City after a night/morning of intense bombing. You were seeing posts last night, even from people in Israel, where they thought that the bombing was happening within Israel's borders because of how intense it was. People in Israel could hear it very close to them, even though it was really happening in Gaza City. People in Gaza and Palestine were describing it as one of the worst nights of bombardments that they've faced in the war yet, which is really saying something because they've been facing nonstop human rights abuses, nonstop horrors for the past 2 years and more. I mean, we always talk about this current escalation as if it started October 7th. We need to talk about it in the grander context of what's been happening since 1948, even before that, since the Balfour Declaration, since the early Zionist movement. We have to contextualize the entire conflict every time we think about it. But even if we're just talking about the last 2 years, the fact that last night was one of the worst nights of bombardments that people in Gaza say they faced, and that even people in Israel just heard the bombs going all night. It's a horrific thing that's happening. It's an escalation on an already horrific humanitarian disaster. And now they've officially launched a further ground offensive into Gaza City. Let's read a bit of what CBC has to say here. So the Israeli military began an offensive targeting Gaza City on Tuesday, slowly squeezing in on the Palestinian territory's largest city that has seen block after block already destroyed in the Israel-Hamas war. Residents still in the city were warned they must leave and head south. This marks yet another escalation in a conflict that has roiled the Middle East, as any potential ceasefire feels even further out of reach despite months of diplomacy. While the military wouldn't offer a timeline for the offensive, Israeli media outlets suggested it could take months. Gaza is burning, said Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz. We will not relent and we will not go back until the completion of the mission. That's terrifying. We will not relent in genociding the Palestinians, frankly. That's really what he's saying. Obviously, that's not what he's saying or what he thinks he's saying, but that's the implications of it. Meanwhile, in Geneva, independent experts commissioned by the United Nations Human Rights Council announced that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, something a lot of us have known has been obvious for a long time now. Many of us would have, again, even argued that there's been a slow-moving genocide going on for much longer than before October 7th. It's just that the slow-moving genocide has turned into a much more rapidly accelerating genocide. Joining a rising international chorus of such accusations, Israel fiercely rejected the claim, calling the experts' report distorted and false, because of course they are. Why would you admit to committing a genocide? That would be brazen for a state that is already one of the most unrepenting and brazen states out there, but even for them, that would be too far to admit what they're doing. But they'll say it in other words, especially when you watch what they say in Hebrew to their own media. It's like they don't realize we can translate their words, but you have some of the most high-ranking members of the government explicitly saying that they want to vanquish Gaza of all Palestinians. They want to ethnically cleanse it. They want to kill them all, get rid of them all. This is explicit language from people in the government, from people in the media, people in the general public. You look at Israeli opinion polling. Sometimes it can be dangerous to tie the actions of a government to the sentiment of the populace at large. And definitely there are thousands of Israelis who are against it, but unfortunately they make up an extremely small percentage of the population. Percentage-wise, it's over 50, 60, maybe even 70% in some polls who are like, we want to ethnically cleanse Gaza. We don't feel bad for them. And go ahead and kill them all. We don't care. That's not hyperbolic. You can look at the polls yourself. They ask it in pretty explicit language oftentimes, and anywhere between 50 and 70% are like, yep, we love it. Kill all the Palestinians, women and children included. So this is a report by the AP talking about what the CBC article mentions, how the UN Commission of Inquiry accuses Israel of genocide in Gaza and urges global action. So a team of independent experts commissioned by the UN Human Rights Council has concluded that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, issuing a report Tuesday that calls on the international community to end the genocide and take steps to punish those responsible for it. The deeply documented findings by the three-member team are the latest accusations of genocide against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government as Israel carries on its war with Gaza, which has killed tens of thousands of people. Israel rejected, again, what it calls a distorted and false report. I also don't like the framing of this just being Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, because even as Ben Shapiro, a staunch Israel supporter, admitted on the Breakfast Club recently, you put any of the contenders for prime minister in office, any high-ranking political figure in Israel, even those in opposition parties, the policy towards Gaza would barely change from one government to the next, because again, this is just the sentiment of the Israeli public, the Israeli government writ large. It's not just a Netanyahu thing. This is a Zionist thing, quite frankly, because this is a whole other story, but the implications of Zionist ideology are ethnic cleansing of the region, okay? You can't have a Jewish majority state in a place that was and still is majority populated by Arabic Muslim people unless you do some ethnic cleansing, some genociding to skew the numbers in your favor. And that has been the issue of Zionism of Israel from the start, before the mass migration of European Jews to Israel. There was a much smaller Jewish population in the region than Arab population. It was something like 10 to 20%, if my memory serves correctly. Now it's closer to 50-50, but still, if the entirety of Israel-Palestine was to become a democratic state, it would not be a Jewish majority state. And for Zionists, that is a huge problem. And so what is the only solution to this? Ethnic cleansing and genocide. So this is just the natural conclusion of Zionist ideology. And so whether or not it's Netanyahu in office, even though he is a horrific human being, other prime ministers, other governments would do the same thing. So just blaming it on his government is not quite an accurate representation of the picture. The Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory in Israel, which was created 4 years ago, has repeatedly documented alleged human rights abuses and violations in Gaza since the deadly October 7th attacks. While neither the Commission nor the 47-member country council that it works for within the UN system can take action against a country, the findings could be used by prosecutors at the International Criminal Court or the UN's International Court of Justice. And even if those courts find them to be committing genocide, so what? Let's face it, international law is mostly a farce. The fact that Israel has America and some other states backing, but particularly America, that's all they need to continue doing what they're doing. Unrepentant. Doesn't matter if the UN says it's a genocide, doesn't matter if the criminal court finds it to be a genocide. They'll have America's backing, and America and Israel can say fuck you to the court, and they'll just do what they want. The report also amounts to a final message from the team headed by former UN rights chief Navi Pillay, who served as a judge on the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda that sentenced 62 people over the 1994 genocide of more than 500,000 Rwandans. All three of the commission's members announced in July that they would resign, citing personal reasons and a need for change. And look, I wish that the Israeli government, people in it, people responsible for this genocide, could be sentenced by the UN International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice. But again, let's face it, the only reason people in Rwanda were able to be sanctioned and convicted like that were because they didn't have the backing of such a powerful state like the US at the time, whereas now Israel, with America's backing, can get away with whatever they want and can expose the fact that international law really has no bearing or power over states when they have enough military power or backing from either themselves or allies. Now back to the CBC article. Much of Gaza City was already laid to waste in the early weeks of the war in 2023, but around 1 million Palestinians have returned there to homes amongst the ruins. Forcing them out means nearly the entire population of Gaza will now be confined to encampments along the coast further south in what Israel calls a humanitarian area. The United Nations estimated on Monday that over 220,000 Palestinians have fled northern Gaza over the past month, after the Israeli military warned that all residents should leave Gaza City ahead of the operation. An estimated 1 million Palestinians were living in the region around Gaza City before the evacuation warnings. Thousands of people streamed out along Gaza's coastal road Tuesday on foot or in vehicles laden with mattresses and other belongings, but hundreds of thousands more remain. So like I said, last night there was a night of intense bombing. Palestinian residents reported heavy strikes across Gaza City on Tuesday morning, with hospitals in the city saying there were at least 69 deaths. And like is always the case in an active war zone, the reported deaths are always going to be undercounted because you're not counting people missing, people under the rubble, bodies that weren't found. This is only confirmed and documented deaths. That's why the death toll as a whole in the conflict, anybody who's familiar with how these type of conflicts go, the official number of 60,000 or whatever it is 100% a severe undercount. What the real number is, we won't know for a long time. We may never truly know, but if anyone is going to argue the fact that it's at least 100,000, then you just don't understand how mortality counts go in active war zones. It was the same in Iraq. It was the same in any conflict you can think of. In the moment, the documented deaths are always way lower, and then you find out after the fact it was much more severe. So from what we can draw from historical comparisons and what experts and doctors on the ground are saying, it's at least 100,000 dead. Personally, from what I can see, I would guess it's even far more than that. So the Shifa hospital received the bodies of 49 people, including 22 children, according to Dr. Rami Mana, a hospital official who said dozens of wounded had also come into the facility. And Al-Ali hospital received 17 bodies, and Al-Quds received 3. So the bombing did not stop for a single moment. There are still bodies under the rubble. Again, definitely more than 69 people killed last night. A very tough night in Gaza. Mohammed Abu Salmiya, director of Al-Shifa Hospital, told the Associated Press several women gathered at the hospital's morgue where AP footage showed many dead bodies in bags. Saud al-Sakani said her daughter, son-in-law, and their children were killed in the strike that flattened their home with about 40 people inside. What is this doing to our collective conscience to read stories like this all the time and then just see that the world's reaction is either to shrug their shoulders, or if you're a Zionist official in Canada, America, the UK, you're actually defending these actions by the Israelis? I feel like our collective conscience is just wiped to smithereens, not just by this, but especially by this and just other events over the past few years. I don't know what's happening to my own humanity. I'm still devastated for the people of Gaza, but to see this all the time and see no action is making me lose any shreds of faith I had in humanity. The only thing that does give me faith is the amount of grassroots antagonism against the Israeli Zionist genocidal project. But to see the people in power just not have that same urgency, or again, even defend these actions, is radicalizing, frankly. It's sickening. It's so disturbing, and it makes you wonder how we've allowed ourselves to be captured by this dehumanizing system that is all about power, control, that is totally okay with this colonial genocidal project and even supports it. And when it does speak out against it, it does it out of both sides of its mouth just to save face, even though we can all see through it. An entire family, she cried, weeping over their bodies at Al-Shifa's hospital morgue. How long will we remain like this? We've had enough, said one of the women, who identified herself as amidst. Throw us into any country, enough of this torture here. And that's so sad, the fact that now they're just begging to be let into any country as migrants, even though we all know if they could, they would want to stay in their homes. But they're at this point, we just don't want to fucking die. Anyway, so there's a lot more in this article. Go read it if you want. Even the families of hostages are begging Netanyahu to halt the operation, because even though the Israeli government says they're trying to save the hostages or whatever, obviously bombing the shit out of Gaza is only going to highly increase the chance that they're going to die. So this is just a horrific situation that keeps getting worse. The Israeli government is chomping at the bit to fully ethnically cleanse and annex Gaza, the West Bank too, but of course right now all the focus is on Gaza. And this comes amongst yet another of several reports that has found the obvious that Israel is committing genocide. And yet nothing will change. America will still have their back 100%. The UK, Canada will still have their back 80%, even though sometimes they'll make tepid criticisms. And unfortunately, nothing will really change. At least that's how it seems in the short term. Even neighboring Arabic countries, even though they'll probably speak more forcefully against Israeli actions, have been enabling this genocide for years now, whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether it's the United Arab Emirates. It's really sad how much they've been captured just by the economic relationship with Israel, or their diplomatic and economic relationship with the United States, into basically either being silent or complacent into what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians for decades. And this is the end result. Is a complete humanitarian disaster, genocide and ethnic cleansing of an oppressed and colonized group. This is not new in human history, but it's yet another chapter of the inhumane barbarism of our species that makes you question, what are we doing?